Gauteng Finance MEC Barbara Creecy tabled a 95.3 billion rand budget for the 2015-2016 financial year. One of our key issues is to address the provincial government departments to spend efficiently and to improve revenue collection, saying that money will be in our reserve for the next financial year. We are going to look at a way of incentivizing departments for their revenue collection. Now, key to expenditure this year are on education, the biggest crux of it all, as I mentioned. Health is the next, and then, of course, the transport sector. So, to give us more detail, we have the MEC in studio with us to explain more. Good to have you, MEC. Thank you very, very much for joining us.
Good morning.
Okay, so breaking it down, education really taking the most of the crux here. But why did you feel that education needed this?
Well, one of the major functions of a provincial government is the provision of health and education services. So between the two of them, they get over 2/3 of the budget. Education getting 36 billion in this financial year and health 34 billion.
Okay, so that's the major focus. But Gauteng being the economic hub, what are the plans to try and boost growth within the province?
Well, obviously, one of the reasons one is giving money to education is because we do have improving outcomes and we need a more skilled workforce going forward into the future. But we are also spending almost 13 billion in this financial year on infrastructure development in the 5 development corridors that Premier Makura spoke about in his speech. And that would include spending on housing, on road infrastructure, both upgrades and new roads. There's quite a lot of investment going into agri-parks in Sedibeng and the West Rand, those being the more economically depressed areas of the province. We are spending money in Ekurhuleni on the jewellery precinct in the special economic development zone. So it is primarily social infrastructure spending and economic infrastructure spending that is aimed at boosting development and putting us on a new growth trajectory.
Yeah. Looking at the unemployment figures here in Gauteng as well, it's not a pretty picture. Job creation is one of the Premier's top priorities as well. Reaching targets, you assisting him with finances, how's this going to happen?
Well, I think that one of the areas the Premier has targeted for investment is the concept of the township enterprise and making sure that our townships are not just dormitories where people sleep, but they also become viable economic centres. We have allocated 137 million in this financial year to kickstart this project, but I think the real investment in terms of the township enterprises will be shifting government spend on goods and services and looking at how we can procure more from the townships. At the moment, we're spending about 5% of our 10 billion rand goods and services budget on township entrepreneurs. We want to expand that to 30% over the next 4 years, and we think that that will provide sustainable markets for emerging entrepreneurs and help to make those areas more economically viable.
Yeah, well, I mean, I would imagine having a look at the recent incidences of looting in the townships has led to this being fast-tracked as well, to try and actually see some tangible results. Is that a concern? I imagine it is a major concern for you, watching, seeing what's happening. But when are we going to see some results coming out of the townships?
Look, the MEC for Economic Development, my colleague MEC Lebogang Maile, has organised to go back. He was on a roadshow last year. He's going back together with officials from our department. We want to go back and register township entrepreneurs, make sure that they are compliant in terms of the broader regulatory environment, but also that they're on the government service supplier database. You would know that Minister Nenet has talked about trying to get a central database of government suppliers. We already have that in Gauteng. We want to add these township entrepreneurs to that database. Good. And then we want to explore a range of options, including supplier rotation, to see how we can spread the spend across our province and achieve localization.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about service delivery. That's another big issue as well. There are major concerns that there's there's a rise of a sense of entitlement amongst a lot of the residents living here, a lack of satisfaction and poverty. How's government going to manage to make up, let's have a look at the number, to make up the 90-odd million deficits? That's a huge part of which must be derived from Gauteng. And will taxpayers actually bear the brunt of all of this?
Well, I think that, first of all, the Premier has placed a lot of emphasis on government being more accountable and more responsive to our citizens. And I do think that we have seen instances where citizens feel frustrated because they have problems, government doesn't respond, doesn't go onto the ground. You would know that we have set up the Interesano service delivery war room. The purpose of that is to respond timelessly both to complaints that are raised by residents, but also in instances where there are service delivery protests, to make sure that there are teams on the ground looking into those issues and responding to residents' grievances.
Yeah.
I think the flip side of all of this is an onus on ourselves as government to make sure that we are spending on the core priorities and not on the nice-to-haves. We have done a major reprioritization process in this budget. We've managed to reprioritize almost 7 billion rand onto the Premier's, what he calls the TMR, Transformation, Modernization and Reindustrialization. That's obviously important in tight fiscal times because it means that there won't be as much new money flowing into the fiscus as we might once have had. But we also have to make sure that we cut spending on non-core activities, including administration, transport and subsistence, venues and catering, and so on.
Okay. Finally, and it's impossible to do it quickly, but I have to ask you, e-tolls. I'm reading that the provincial government is going to contribute to e-tolls. From what I'm gathering, e-tolls are here to stay. They're not going anywhere. Are we going to see a reduction in rates? Is the province going to help? What is the way forward? What was said yesterday?
Well, I think we know that Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa is still busy with his team. So we don't have the final dispensation yet, but I think that what we are expecting is relief to motorists. You would know that the advisory panel recommended a hybrid funding model, which would include the user pay principle, but contributions from national and provincial government to relieve the burden on motorists. Because we don't know the amounts involved yet,
it's still to be determined.
Yes, but we have kept money in the reserve so that we can appropriate that later in the year when necessary.
Well, there you go. There's an answer for some of the motorists out there. I'm sure a lot of people are asking that question. Happy to hear the answer. This is the Gauteng MEC of Finance, Barbara Creecy. Thank you very much for talking to us here.
Thank you.